if you were to be asked, hey, what do you think the Bible says about the question of homosexuality? My suggestion for you would be to turn to the Romans 1 passage as your initial passage, okay? Again, the other ones are fine as well, but Romans 1, I believe, is the most straightforward and defensible text on the subject, all right? Let's look at what it says first, and then I'll explain to you why I think that's the case. So here you got Romans 1, just so you know, the context here is a creation narrative. Paul's talking about creation, talking about how God made the world, talking about how he made humanity. And Paul says that God's fingerprints are all over creation. In fact, it's so obvious that God has made what we see. Paul says men are without excuse. Now, some people, however, reject the obvious evidence of God's hand in creation. And instead of worshiping God, the creator, they decide to worship the creation. And Paul says those people, God's going to let them continue in the rebellion. And then he comes to this passage here. He says, for this reason, God gives these people who are rejecting God's obvious hand in creation, he gives them over to their degrading passions. For their women exchange the natural function for that which is unnatural. And in the same way also the men abandoned the natural function of the woman and burned in their desire toward one another. Men with men committing indecent acts and receiving in their own persons the due penalty of their error. Now, just so you know, the word, their function, where it says they exchange the natural function, is the Greek word krisis, which according to the standard Greek lexicon means use, relations, or function, especially that of sexual intercourse. In other words, Paul here is making a design argument. He's saying, in the context of God created the world, he's made males and females to function in a heterosexual way. For a man, a woman is the appropriate sexual outlet, and for a woman, a man is the appropriate sexual outlet. However, these people abandoned the natural sexual function that the opposite sex has, and instead they had sex with each other. The women had sex with each other, the men had sex with each other. And this is the sin that Paul is describing here.
At Stand to Reason, we help Christians to think clearly so they can share their worldview with others. If you want to see more videos like this one, go ahead and click the subscribe button.